I was so happy to be home from work. It had been a very long day, and I couldn't wait to see my husband, Tom. "Hi, darling, I'm home."
I'm in the kitchen.
I took my jacket off and walked through to the kitchen. Tom was standing at the sink. I walked over to him, put my arms around him, and gave him a big hug. Immediately, he collapsed on the floor. Ah! I know you want to hear more, but before I continue, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell too. I rang for an ambulance, and within a few minutes, they were wheeling him out on a stretcher. I went in the ambulance with Tom. I was a mess. I couldn't stop crying. When we got to the hospital, they told me to go to the waiting room whilst the doctor looked at Tom. I could tell by the doctor's face when he came into the room that Tom had died. No! I burst into tears.
I'm very sorry. There was nothing we could do for your husband. I'm afraid some sort of poison was in his system.
Poison? What do you mean poison? Are you saying he's been murdered?
We're not saying anything, but we would like to conduct some tests on you if that's okay.
Yes, of course, anything that will help. The doctor took lots of samples from me and ran various tests. When they told me the results, I was really confused.
We have found some foreign residue that could have been poisonous, but we think it's just a coincidence.
But I didn't agree with them. By the time I had gotten home, I had pretty much convinced myself that I was the one that had accidentally killed Tom. I must have gotten the poison from that weird oracle that I went to. You see, about a month ago, Tom had convinced me to go to see an oracle. I had been really stressed at work, and he thought that it would do me good. I wasn't really sure, but I decided it couldn't hurt to give it a go. But unfortunately, at the meeting with the oracle, I accidentally broke her crystal ball. I thought she was going to explode with rage.
What have you done?
I'm sorry, it was an accident.
You stupid woman. You're going to pay for this. I'm going to put a curse on you.
At the time, I just laughed it off. I didn't believe for one moment that she was capable of putting a curse on me. But after what had happened to Tom, I started to believe that she really had done it. I began to feel really guilty, and I was worried that I might kill someone else. So I vowed from that day on never to touch anyone and never to let anyone else touch my skin. I wore long-sleeved clothes and trousers all the time. But even though I did that, I still couldn't stop feeling guilty for what I had done to Tom. I decided that there was nothing else for it. I would have to hand myself in to the police. I went to the station and spoke to the officer on duty. I want to hand myself in.
What for?
I murdered my husband. The officer looked shocked.
Right, I see. Well, you'd better come with me then.
He led me through to the interrogation room and told me to sit down and wait.
An officer will be through shortly to take your statement.
Thank you. He left the room, shaking his head as he went. It was probably the first time he had heard someone admit to murder. I didn't have to wait long before 2 officers came in.
We understand you want to report a murder.
It happened a few weeks ago. I can't live with the guilt any longer. I have to confess. As I began to tell them all about how the oracle had cursed me and I had poisoned Tom, they jotted down notes. But eventually, the officer stopped writing and looked at me.
Oh, miss, you didn't kill your husband. Someone else must have slipped the poison into his food or something. We know that your husband was the head of a major car company. He had a lot of enemies.
But the hospital found foreign residue when they tested me. It must have been me that poisoned Tom.
That could have come from anywhere. Anyway, we have already seen the doctor's reports. They've ruled that out. The poison must have come from somewhere else.
But the oracle, the curse.
There's no such thing as curses. Now, don't you worry about it anymore. You can go home now.
As I got up to leave, one of the officers suddenly knocked his coffee cup, spilling the contents onto the floor. I slipped on the wet floor, and the other officer grabbed hold of my wrist to stop me from falling. Ah, no! Don't touch my skin! I looked at the policeman, expecting him to collapse on the floor, just as Tom had done. But nothing happened. I was so shocked and confused.
Go on, go home now. Just try and relax.
Okay. When I got home, I made myself a cup of tea and sat down on the sofa. So if it wasn't me that murdered Tom, who was it? I decided to do my own investigation. I looked through Tom's computer to see if I could see anything dodgy or threatening, but there was no sign of him having any enemies. I just couldn't understand what or who could have done this to Tom. Eventually, my brain couldn't take it anymore, so I decided I would go to bed. As soon as my head touched the pillow, I fell straight to sleep. I'm not sure how long I had been asleep for, but I suddenly woke up and sat bolt upright in bed. Tom was in my bedroom around me. I switched the light on, but there was no one there. My heart was beating 10 to the dozen, and I was trying hard not to freak out. Just calm down. It was obviously just a hallucination or something. I managed to get my breathing back under control and went back to sleep. But when I woke up in the morning, I couldn't stop thinking about the night before. I decided I would take a look through Tom's stuff. Maybe he had received a letter from someone threatening him. I began to search through his desk and through all the pockets of his coats and trousers. It was as I was looking through his closet that I came across a phone. That's weird. I don't remember seeing Tom with this phone. It's not the one he usually used. I opened it up and started reading the messages that had been sent. Suddenly, my heart went cold and my stomach lurched. "You are the love of my life." I couldn't believe it. Tom had been messaging some woman telling her that he loved her. Was he cheating on me all along? As I scrolled through the messages, I suddenly came across a photo that the woman had sent of herself. What? You have got to be kidding me. I recognized her face immediately. It was the Oracle woman that I had been to see. I just don't understand what is going on here. I decided that I would take everything down to the police station to see what they thought about it. As soon as I showed the officers Tom's phone and told them who the woman was, they sprang into action.
Okay, we will arrange a meeting with her, but first we need to find someone that sounds like your husband, Tom. We will get all of our officers to read out a sentence, and you tell us which one sounds the most like Tom.
Okay. I listened after one officer after another read out the line.
Hi, honey. How are you doing?
I kept on shaking my head, but then suddenly I looked up. Him! That one!
Yes?
Yes, he sounds a lot like Tom. So the officer called up the Oracle woman and asked her to meet him at the park the following afternoon at 2 p.m. But instead of the man going along to meet the Oracle woman, as soon as she arrived at the meeting place, she was swarmed by police. She turned to run away, but the police grabbed her and put her in handcuffs.
Oh, no, you don't. You're coming with us.
What's happening? What are you doing to me?
We will answer all of your questions at the station.
When they brought her into the station, I made sure that she didn't catch sight of me. As soon as they took her through to the interrogation room, I went into the room on the other side and watched through the one-way mirror. I could hear via an intercom what she was saying.
Okay, yes. I did pretend I was an oracle.
You told Tom's wife that you would put a curse on her.
Yes. Look, it's not the first time a husband wants to leave his wife, is it?
No, but why would you make her think she'd killed him?
He knew that she would never let him go, so he decided to fake his own death. If she thought he was dead, then we would be free to run away together.
How do we know he is still alive?
I'll prove it. I will call him and ask him to meet me somewhere.
She took out her phone and punched in some numbers.
Hi, darling, it's me. Listen, something came up at work, but I can meet you this evening. Let's go to the pizza restaurant in town, say 7 o'clock? Okay, bye, darling. I love you too.
My heart nearly broke in two when I heard her say she loved him. How can she be in love with him? He is my Tom. I wanted to scream out loud, but I managed to keep it all inside. The last thing I wanted was for her to know that I was in the building. I watched as the policeman left the room. A few seconds later, he was standing beside me.
Did you hear all that?
Yes.
Are you okay?
I nodded. I didn't trust myself to speak anymore in case I burst into tears.
We will keep her here for the night. Do you think you will be able to go to meet Tom tonight?
Yes, I think so.
We will have 2 officers waiting outside the restaurant, just in case he tries anything. You won't have anything to worry about.
Thank you. I was so nervous as I made my way to the pizza restaurant, but I was determined to confront Tom. When I had first found out that he had faked his own death and had been cheating on me, I was distraught. But it didn't take long for my sadness to turn into anger. How could he have done this to me? I didn't arrive until 7:15. I wanted to be absolutely certain that Tom would be there before me. I gave his name to the waitress and she pointed to a table in the corner. I immediately recognized Tom, even though he had his back to me. As I walked towards him, my heart started pounding. I took a deep breath. Hello, Tom. You should have seen his face. I have never seen anyone look so shocked in all of my life. I literally thought he was going to pass out right there and then.
Becky, what are you doing here?
I might say the same to you. You're looking quite well for a dead man.
About that.
Save your breath. I know all about your little relationship with the Oracle. You are pathetic. You didn't even have the courage to tell me to my face that we were over. You are such a coward.
I didn't want to hurt you.
Are you serious? You didn't want to hurt me? You made me think that I had killed you. I felt so guilty.
I'm so sorry.
Sorry isn't good enough. Do you realize how much pain I had gone through over the last few weeks? I basically kept myself away from all other humans because I was scared I would kill someone else.
I didn't think about that.
No, of course you didn't, because you only ever think of yourself, don't you? Tom looked really sheepish. He put his head down.
I really am sorry.
I shook my head. I'm not going to waste any more of my time on you. You don't deserve it, but you do deserve what is coming to you. I walked out of the restaurant, my head held high, and went straight over to the 2 officers that were waiting outside. He's all yours.
Thank you.
I went and stood across the street and waited to see what happened next. It was only a couple of minutes later that I saw the 2 officers coming back out of the restaurant with Tom. He was in handcuffs and was protesting loudly.
Why are you arresting me? I haven't done anything. I wouldn't call faking your own death and laying the guilt on your wife doing nothing, would you? It's not against the law to leave your wife. No, it isn't, but it is against the law to commit fraud, and faking your own death is fraud. Plus the amount of doctors and police time you've wasted, the judge won't take too kindly to that.
I watched as they put Tom into their police car. As they drove past me, I could still see him arguing with the police. The next morning, one of the officers came to my house.
We just wanted to let you know that both Tom and the Oracle are being charged.
I obviously looked sad because he put his arm around me to comfort me.
Don't worry, everything will be okay.
Thank you.
And, you know, we could always go out for a coffee sometime. If you'd like to, that is.
I looked at him and smiled. Sure.